My pet octopus was sick. Whenever he saw me, he'd turn pink and make a gurgling sound. I was worried sick. Why do you keep making that noise? Are you hungry? I ended up spending all my savings, but I still couldn't seem to feed him enough. So I took him to the seashore, ready to release him back into the wild. Along the way, his 8 tentacles gestured frantically. When he saw that I didn't understand, he finally spoke in desperation. Don't release me. It's just my mating season. It had been a week since the sea monster escaped from the research institute. The internet was buzzing with speculation. My friend works at the institute. They said the sea monster is like a giant octopus, with tons and tons of tentacles. Oof, the kind with suckers. My mind is going to a dirty place, so I'm just gonna see myself out. Oi, person above, you can't just leave after saying that. Spill the tea. I rubbed my neck, which was covered in red, sucker-like marks. The rain had been pouring for a week straight, and a damp chill had seeped into everything in the house. I put a bowl of dog food in the microwave to make it crispy again, then carried it down to the basement. The moment I opened the door, a tentacle eagerly snaked through the gap, like a puppy begging to be petted. I gave it a few casual strokes. The texture was smooth, supple, and springy. The sea monster immediately let out a happy gurgle. After I checked the water quality, he was still gurgling. I asked worriedly, "Why do you keep making that noise? You're not getting sick, are you?" Not only that, but he had also become incredibly clingy. Even though I had just seen him last night, he wrapped his tentacles around me tightly. How many times have I told you? No sneaking into small spaces. I struggled to peel off a tentacle that was trying to burrow under the hem of my shirt. He was several meters long, each tentacle as thick as my forearm, and lined with suckers that made a series of soft, pop sounds as they detached from my skin. After prying off a few of them, I was already exhausted. I caught my reflection in the glass of the aquarium. I was a complete mess. My white shirt was soaked through, my black framed glasses were crooked on my nose, and a flush had risen to my cheeks. "Stop it," I frowned, adjusted my glasses, and scolded him. "Stop misbehaving. I have to go to the institute." Splash, splash. The sea monster slapped the water's surface in displeasure, making exaggerated gestures with his tentacles. Even as a biologist, I couldn't decipher what he was trying to express. After he finished the entire bowl of dog food, I turned to leave. He panicked, a powerful tentacle wrapped firmly around my wrist. For the first time he spoke. "Human, don't go. I in heat." The sea monster was much like an octopus. He had 3 hearts, 8 tentacles, and 9 brains. He was hyper-intelligent, but had an unusually short lifespan. A brief existence was just long enough for mating and reproduction, ending quietly before any chance of further evolution. But this sea monster was an exception. His lifespan was long, and he was exceptionally smart. The institute's director, Victor Thompson, had paid a fortune for him, hoping to unlock the genetic code to immortality. I led the entire project team, studying him for 3 whole years. But a week before our research was set to be published, I used the chaos of an incident to set him free. Before, no matter how clever he was still an animal. I never imagined that now, he had actually learned to speak, although the words came out haltingly, one by one. It was an unprecedented breakthrough. A shiver of excitement ran through me. I met his deep blue eyes, unable to suppress my elation. "Primo, can you say a few more words?" I had named him Primo, for the day he first arrived at the institute. 80 like you, he let out a soft cry, his skin turning a bright pink. He blew a few round bubbles into the air and clumsily formed a heart shape with 2 of his tentacles. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. I shouldn't have let him watch those romantic dramas. He's become a lovesick fool. I switched Primo's videos from soap operas to cartoons. I arrived at the institute right on time. Just as I sat down, Miles Morgan burst into my office. "Aiden, is your paper finished?" I looked at him calmly. "Shouldn't you be focusing on your own research? Why are you so concerned with my paper? You know damn well my research is dead in the water without the sea monster right now. You're the only one in the entire institute who has any chance of producing results." And so, before I could finish, a soft, damp tentacle snaked out from my cuff and quietly hooked around my pinky finger. How did Primo get on me? He must have shrunk down and slipped into my clothes before I left. Without me noticing, he'd just barely escaped this place. If he were discovered, it would be a disaster. Miles's tone was arrogant. "Aiden, I know you've always had a thing for me. Look, if you just let me take credit for your research this time, I'll agree to be with you." I shoved my hands in my pockets, shaking Primo down into the fabric. I lifted my gaze to meet his. I was just repaying a debt. Miles, who was reasonably handsome, flashed what he thought was a charming smile. Don't pretend. If you didn't like me, why did you tutor me, apply to the same university, and then follow me to the same research institute after graduation? Besides, when I asked you out back then, you said yes, didn't you? My family, the Davies, and his, the Morgans, were neighbors. Years ago, a tsunami dragged my parents and me into the deep sea. When I opened my eyes again, 7 days and nights had passed. I was lying on a pile of rocks, covered in injuries. Miles Morgan stood beside me, claiming he had saved me. Then he started to cry. Aiden, your parents, they're gone. After that, Miles's parents handled the funeral arrangements for my mother and father and often looked after me. Miles became the closest person I had in the world. We studied together, ate dinner at his house together. Many people assumed we were a couple, a misconception I even started to believe myself, until one day. Miles confessed his feelings for me in public. Our classmates were all hooting and hollering, while Miles shot me a pleading look. I knew Miles better than anyone and immediately guessed it was all for some stupid dare. Not wanting him to lose face, I gave a casual nod. No one would take it seriously. A few days later, however, I received a video. In it, Miles was bragging smugly. So what if he's top of the class? He's my personal study boy. You know what they used those for back in the day, right? Now Aiden tutors me, but in the future, he'll be warming my bed. A wave of acid rose in my stomach. It was utterly nauseating. It was on that day that Miles Morgan rotted away completely in my mind, his image merging with the ugly sneer he wore now. I saved your life. I don't believe you don't have any feelings for me at all. A tightness gripped my chest. Miles, I've long since repaid whatever debt I owed you over the years. If I hadn't vouched for him, his resume wouldn't have even gotten him through the institute's doors. Since we're on the topic, I've been meaning to ask you, was it really you who saved me back then? There were too many holes in his story. Miles was small and frail back then. How could he have possibly rescued me from a violent tsunami? Tsunamis are one of the deadliest natural disasters. Moreover, judging by Miles's behavior ever since, he was hardly a benevolent person. Why would he have risked his life to save me? Aiden, you're just changing the subject. If it wasn't me, who else could it have been? Miles's eyes darted around, his face a mask of guilt. Primo had at some point crawled out and climbed up to my chest. A tentacle brushed against a sensitive peak, sending a strange shiver through me and pulling me back from the suffocating memories. Aiden, I know I've been distant lately, getting closer to Director Thompson's daughter. But if you just give me your research, I promise I'll choose you over her. So he thought he had a choice. There had always been rumors around the institute that Miles was a social climber. But his skills were mediocre, and Director Thompson had never given him the time of day. Miles had clearly decided to use my research to curry favor with his potential father-in-law. A vein throbbed in my temple. I took off my black framed glasses and rubbed my eyes. From Miles's perspective, the sunlight filtering through the blinds cast a glow on the young man's fair, clean-cut profile. His dark eyes were large and bright, his lips soft and pink. He exuded a scholarly air and was, without his glasses, excessively handsome. In Miles's memory, Aiden had always been just a gloomy, unremarkable science nerd. That was why he'd felt disgusted for a while after Aiden had accepted his confession. If he had known what Aiden looked like without his glasses, he would have definitely been serious. Besides, Aiden looked so inexperienced. In bed, he'd surely be easy to dominate. The more Miles thought, the more fixated he became, his eyes locked on my moving lips, not hearing a word I was saying. Are you deaf? I'm talking to you. I raised my voice. Miles, can you hear me now if I call you a bastard? Huh. Miles, still in a daze, unconsciously reached out his hand. Hiss, the next second, his index finger was pricked hard, as if by a needle. Blood instantly welled up when Primo was extremely angry. He could produce a hard, venomous barb. Apparently, even he couldn't stand to listen to this bullshit anymore. Fearing Miles would discover Primo in my shirt, I quickly shoved him toward the door. Miles, you can like whoever you want. I'm not interested in you, Aiden, I don't believe you. In the struggle, the collar of my shirt was torn open. Miles pointed at the marks on my neck, his face turning dark and sinister. Aiden, you're disgusting. You have been sleeping with that sea monster. You didn't let it go just so you could screw it whenever you want, did you? Miles's face was contorted with rage as he advanced on me. Aiden, does it make you feel good? That was the last straw. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. He's certainly more impressive than you. After all, he has 8 of them, and you're just a pint-sized prick. The door was open. The entire institute heard it. Miles and I were both summoned to Director Thompson's office. Director Thompson was usually a master of smoothing things over, but this time, he didn't bother to hear both sides. "Professor Davies, I've invested a lot of money into this project, and it wasn't for you to get paid to have shouting matches," he said, tapping his desk impatiently. "The sea monster is lost, the results can't be produced, and you bear the primary responsibility for that. Instead of trying to make amends, you're fighting with your colleagues. What kind of behavior is that?" I lowered my eyes. "You're right, Director, I should take responsibility." Miles clutched his swollen cheek. "Hess, and how will you take responsibility, Aiden?" With empty words, "I'm prepared to tender my resignation." The moment the words left my mouth, the office fell silent. Director Thompson hesitated. "Professor Davies, let's not be hasty. I was the lead researcher on the project and held several key patents. Director Thompson had thought about replacing me, but he couldn't find anyone suitable." Miles, however, was ecstatic. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. "Aiden, you said it yourself," he turned to the director. "Director Thompson, don't worry. Leave the final stages to me. I guarantee I'll complete the project." The project was just a step away from completion. He was confident he could reap the rewards. As I walked out of the institute, I quickly pulled Primo out to check on him. I had thought that returning to the place that had imprisoned him for 3 years would trigger a stress response. Instead, I saw Primo waving his tentacles, his 2 big, blue eyes blinking as he squeaked out a few oddly accented syllables. "Bully, you eat them." Even the most ferocious sea monster, when small enough to be held in one's palm, just looked adorably silly. My mood lifted instantly. I gave his head a little smooch. "Eating people is illegal." A flicker of disappointment crossed Primo's eyes. Not long after I got home, I got a call from Miles. "Aiden, don't worry, I won't let your noble sacrifice be in vain. What a psycho." Primo had more sense than him. For a moment, out of respect for his parents, I had considered advising him to resign as soon as possible. But now, it seemed pointless. He'd probably just think I was trying to sabotage his grand future. "Adie, don't be mad." Primo pressed a tentacle to my cheek. The suckers gently pulsed, a light, tickling sensation. A smile touched my lips. "You must be hungry. I'll go make you something to eat." The only thing I knew how to cook was fried eggs. Primo ate 100 of them. But he was still hungry. A low rumbling emanated from his body cavity. He was insatiable. He had never been like this before. I started to suspect he was seriously ill. I was so worried that I had a dream. In the dream, I was in a dark, perilous ocean. The boat I was on had capsized, and the sea monster wrapped itself around my body, lifting me high. It spoke in a deep voice. "Hungry, 80, I'm so hungry." A thick appendage I had never seen before pressed against my lips, tentatively probing its way into my mouth. It was a hectocotylus, the specialized arm used for mating. After studying him for so long, this was the first time I had ever seen this tentacle. I whimpered, swallowing the unknown fluid, my eyes meeting his, which were glowing with a faint blue light. My heart skipped a beat. "Hungry, so hungry. No, that's not right." His other tentacles, covered in powerful suckers, coiled around me from all directions as if they had been waiting for this moment. The movements were rough, the strength astonishing and impossible to resist. My skin prickled with 1,000 tiny pains and a terrifying sense of adhesion. "It's not hunger, it's the breeding season." My pupils contracted. The suckers tightened their grip, squeezing the air from my lungs as if they wanted to devour me whole. "Adie, you smell so good." I woke with a jolt, the sheets damp beneath me. Outside, lightning flashed and thunder roared. I threw back the covers. One of Primo's tentacles was possessively wrapped around a very critical part of me. I froze, struck by lightning. My chest heaved as I pulled Primo off me. "You idiot, I told you not to go sneaking into small spaces." Strange. Why would I have a dream like that? Was it just because I'd been pent up for too long? Primo started gurgling again, innocently trying to placate me with his tentacles. I ordered him with a headache. "Primo, even if you're hungry, you can't just eat whatever you want if I catch you in my bed again. I'm releasing you back into the sea." Primo licked away a smudge of fluid. "Ow, I used to donate regularly to an orphanage." But Primo's appetite was so voracious that my savings were quickly dwindling. So, I accepted an invitation from my former mentor to interview for a position at my alma mater. The interviewer was a new face, and he immediately questioned the authenticity of my resume. Coincidentally, right after the interview, Miles called, wanting to hire me as his private assistant to help him with some research. It all clicked. He must have paid off the interviewer. Miles had probably realized he'd taken on more than he could handle and was about to go down in flames. After I flatly refused him, his voice took on a desperate, vicious edge. Aiden, I'll be waiting for you to come crawling back to me. He didn't know that the dean of the biology department was my mentor. The interview was just a formality. 3 days later, I reported for duty at the department. The interviewer's face was black. Even if your resume is legitimate, your introverted personality makes you completely unsuitable for teaching. Hiring you is absurd. His eyes darted around. Unless you can enroll 20 students in your class within a month. I didn't want to make things difficult for my mentor, so I nodded in agreement. Back home, I created an online profile. I uploaded my academic history, and it quickly went viral. The comment section exploded. Graduated with a PhD from a top-tier university at 22, became a researcher at the country's leading institute at 25, published over 10 SCI papers in just a few years. What a terrifying academic prodigy. One, holy crap, is not enough to express my awe. Another one faking an academic persona. Aren't they afraid of getting exposed? A real academic god wouldn't have time to mess around on social media. I stroked Primo, who was perched on my shoulder, sipping a bubble tea. When he was in his small form, his suckers were dense, hard little bumps that pressed against my fingertips. 80 sweet, he was still hungry. A damp tentacle rested on my Adam's apple, transmitting his anxiety and unease. The insatiable gurgle from his belly was like a bottomless pit. I sighed. Why are you still making that noise? Are you still hungry? Primo seemed confused about his own body, repeating plaintively, 80, I'm hungry, so hungry. If this continued, I'd be out of rent money long before I managed to fill his stomach. I pinned a comment. I will be teaching at B University soon. All are welcome to enroll in my course. Then, I decided to start a live stream. The questions in the stream were all over the place. I diligently answered the few professional ones that came up. Halfway through, something felt wrong. What's wrong with the streamer? My shoulders trembled, and a fine sweat broke out on my forehead. A tingle of electricity shot down my spine. Out of the camera's view, several of Primo's tentacles had snuck under the hem of my white shirt and were running wild. He was smart, targeting all my most sensitive spots. Is it just me, or did the streamer get all flushed in a second? No, for real. What's that thing wriggling under his shirt? If he hadn't been so serious about academia a minute ago, I'd almost suspect he was an e-thought. That expression is so tempting. Before the stream, I had left Primo in the living room with a tablet. His ability to imitate was frighteningly good. What had he been watching this time? It couldn't possibly be a Tentacles X streamer video, could it? Slightly annoyed, I reached a hand under my shirt and grabbed a tentacle. At the same time, I heard a faint rustling from the living room. Miles Morgan was stealthily rummaging through my files. He was in deep trouble this time. He couldn't understand most of the project's content. Director Thompson had flown into a rage, threatening to have him blacklisted from the entire industry if he couldn't produce results. He was frantic, muttering to himself, "It's all Aiden's fault. If he'd just agreed to be my assistant, I'm sure I could have understood these files." The stark white light above flickered, and then one of the bulbs went out with a pop. From a few meters away, I watched him coldly. "Miles, what are you doing in my house?" A damp, bone-chilling air silently filled the room. Miles felt a sudden, uncanny dread. He was actually a little afraid of the man before him. To bolster his courage, he raised his voice, striking first. "Aiden, there's a limit to playing hard to get. You said you'd give me the research, but you left me with a pile of useless data. I found it absurd. Miles, you graduated from B University, for God's sake. You've looked through all those files. Haven't you noticed something strange? It's just a standard life extension research project. What could be wrong with it? They were extracting the sea monster's genes, testing them directly on infants, and then harvesting the effective components from the infants to sell to the rich." Miles shrugged, unconcerned. "So what? Infants can't talk. It's an honor for them to contribute to scientific research." I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been thrown over me. "So you knew all along?" Miles laughed in disbelief. "Aiden, you're no saint either, are you? That sea monster was cut up 1,000 times, bled countless vials, and was on the brink of death, but I never saw you stand up for it. And it was so fond of you, too." My head buzzed. My nails dug into my palms, the pain sharp and piercing. Miles was right. In this world, the only one I had truly wronged was Primo, but I couldn't understand why. Why did he have such deep feelings for me? For the sake of the experiments, the Institute couldn't anesthetize him. He had to endure the agony while fully conscious, watching himself be dissected and his blue blood drawn into tube after tube. With his abilities, escaping would have been easy. He had been imprisoned for 3 years, entirely because of me. After every experiment, I would go and sit with him for a while. I'd ask the same futile question over and over. Primo, does it hurt a lot? He would always swim over weakly, his tentacles taking my hand as he blew a string of happy bubbles. Every time I met his deep blue eyes, their depth made me want to look away. I even began to question myself. Was there any point in continuing my father's research project? I owed him too much. That's why after submitting the evidence of the Institute's illegal activities, the first thing I did was set him free. But he didn't leave. He found his way to my home and attached himself to me. Such a fool. 80, don't cry. A tentacle gently wiped a tear from the corner of my eye. Die bullying 80 die. His voice grew distorted. His body expanded, and tentacles shot out from the shadows. They moved so fast they were just a blur, aiming straight for Miles's neck. Cracked the faint sound of bone fracturing. The anger on Miles's face froze, replaced by utter terror. Another tentacle lifted him several inches off the ground, his face turning a purplish red. Primo, stop, I commanded. Primo paused reluctantly. He bullied you. Bad man, Miles crumpled to the floor, drool trickling from the corner of his mouth. Cough, cough. Aiden, you've been hiding the sea monster. You've lost your mind. It's a specimen for the rich to create their eternal life. You'll be hunted down. Miles grabbed my pant leg, still lost in his delusions. Aiden, bring it back with you. Are you really going to abandon your father's ideals for a monster? I looked at Miles calmly. This is the real reason I left the Institute. My father had been a top scientist in biopharmaceuticals. He was dedicated to using genetics to reduce pain and disease, to extend human life. All these years, I thought I was fulfilling his final wish. But at a private dinner party, I overheard a conversation between Director Thompson and several wealthy investors. Aiden is brilliant, but too stubborn. The projects he proposes won't make us big money. We'd end up losing funds. We have to hide things from him just to keep him working. It's laughable. Why should I care if ordinary people live or die? The more expensive the product, the better. We can spend a little money to have endless life and the most brilliant minds. Our genes will be fundamentally different from ordinary people. In a few years, we'll evolve into another species entirely. The gap between humans will be greater than the gap between a human and an ant. A dark chasm had been torn open in my pristine world. Does a human care about the life of an ant? The rich wanted the poor to live short, stupid lives. All of this went against everything my father stood for. Bright searchlights swept past the windows outside. The house was surrounded. Aiden, it's too late. You can't escape, Miles laughed grimly. I made a split-second decision and threw open the basement door. Aiden, you'd rather choose a sea monster than me. The light from behind Primo cast him in silhouette, making him look like a man-eating beast from a mythology book. I shot Miles a glare and moved closer to Primo. Don't listen to his nonsense. You're not a monster, you're my treasure. Primo extended a tentacle, lifting me securely onto his shoulder. From my high perch, I looked down in disgust at the man on the floor. Miles, the human heart is far more terrifying than any sea monster. Primo raised a tentacle and gave Miles the middle finger. He then deliberately stepped on Miles's hand as he strode away. We settled temporarily in a sparsely populated seaside village. Lately, not only had Primo's appetite surged, but he was also running a high fever, his whole body hot to the touch. I couldn't help but wonder if keeping him captive was a selfish act. After my parents died, Primo was the only one who loved me unconditionally. My feelings for him were a complex, tangled mess. He had already become the most important being in my life. Primo was soaking in the narrow bathtub, the sunlight on the water creating a rainbow of colors. After feeding him several buckets of fish, I stroked his smooth, round head and teased, I really can't afford to keep you anymore. What if I just release you? He snapped to attention, turning pink. His tentacles eagerly wrapped around me, desperately trying to absorb my warmth, just like a pet terrified of being abandoned. Don't release me, I can become a person. A strange emotion flickered through me. Primo greedily placed his 8th arm, the hectocotylus, into my palm. 80, I'm itchy, so itchy. He seemed unable to distinguish between appetite and libido, his expression innocent as he committed his transgressions. Am I dying of a terminal illness? Don't be afraid, it'll be over soon. I closed my eyes and helped him with his itch. I had been so engrossed in my research for years that I hadn't even taken care of my own needs. The few times I had indulged, it had all been for Primo. A tingling sensation spread across my scalp. My throat was dry and an inopportune fire began to burn within me. Don't, I looked down. My zipper was open. Primo believed in reciprocity. I had helped him, so he helped me. Late at night, I would take him to play in the sea. He would bob in the waves, grabbing things and tossing them onto the beach. Sometimes it was a conch shell, other times a fish. I'd stand nearby and clap. Wow, Primo, you're amazing. Is this your friend? Is this food? 80 eat. So if you can eat it, it's food, and if you can't, it's a friend. In the end, Primo would swallow them all whole. Friends did delicious. A month later, Director Thompson's company was shut down. The sunset over the sea that day was exceptionally beautiful. I looked at Primo and finally made a decision. It was time for everything to come to an end. I rented a boat and headed out to sea. Primo sensed something was wrong and waved his tentacles restlessly. One of them was hooked around my wrist, refusing to let go for even a second. I steeled myself, ignoring the ache in my chest, and steered the boat far out into the deep ocean. Returning to the sea was the best possible outcome for Primo. He visibly tensed, transforming back into his enormous original form. He coiled on the bow of the boat, his tentacles gesturing frantically at me. 80, go back, back. I shook my head, unable to look him in the eye. Fierce winds whipped up massive waves and rain pelted my face like needles. Primo, all this time I've owed you an apology. I took one of his tentacles and pressed a kiss to it. Go home, don't let humans catch you again. Primo's suckers clung to me tightly, terrified of being abandoned. He whimpered, no, don't release me, I'm just in heat. The wind was too strong, tearing his words apart. A giant wave crashed over us. The boat groaned, tilting precariously. The size difference was too great. I couldn't budge Primo an inch. Instead, I was completely engulfed by the icy seawater. In the face of nature's wrath, human struggle is futile. The sea was a deep, dark blue. I let myself sink into the endless abyss. In the void, a hand grabbed my wrist. Soft lips pressed against mine, and a breath of air was passed into my lungs, easing the stabbing pain. Above, the storm raged, but below the surface, it was serene and peaceful. I opened my eyes and met a pair of blue ones. Before me was a devastatingly handsome face, dark hair flowing with the current, gazing at me with devotion and focus. Schools of fish swam behind him, as if paying homage to a newborn sea god. He parted his lips, silently mouthing my name, Aiden. Then he held my shoulders and generously pressed his lips to mine again, until I was satisfied and excess air bubbled out. In that flash of light, I remembered my childhood. Every year, my parents would take me to a small seaside town for vacation. My mother made me a nimble little robot octopus, which I would control to play in the ocean. Most of the octopuses ignored it. But one little gray octopus treated me like a real friend. I would pilot the robot octopus, and together we would wear hermit crab shells and stroll along the seabed. When the current was too strong, he would extend a tentacle to hold me back, preventing me from being swept away. I spent a great deal of time with him, filling my diary with entries about him. But my mother warned me, it's fine to play, but you can't interfere in its affairs with other creatures. In documentaries, cameramen would coldly watch as the animals they filmed were eaten by predators. If they intervened out of pity, the predator, who failed to find food, would be the one to die. I was too young then to understand right from wrong. I could only pray that my little octopus would not encounter danger. Until one day, the little octopus was bit and grievously injured by a predator. Frantic with worry, I dove into the water and saved him. My mother did not approve. I cried until my eyes were red and swollen. But I don't want him to die. He's not just some other creature. He's my best friend in the end. My mother sighed and acquiesced. I put him in a jar and cared for him meticulously. The jar sat on my bedside table. We were no longer separated by a monitor, but by a thin pane of glass. In that moment, a shiver ran through me. He had surely recognized me as the robot octopus from the sea. I told him a bedtime story every night, and he even learned to extend a damp tentacle to bid me good night. I was convinced he was different, like the little prince's unique rose. He was my one-of-a-kind little octopus. After his wounds healed, I released him back into the sea, promising to see him again next summer. But children are forgetful. Once school started, I made new friends and forgot about him, until the tsunami hit. A little octopus broke through its genetic locks, waiting 10 long years for the person who was late. Soft tentacles dragged me toward the shore, letting its own body be scraped and torn by the rocks. The waves pulled us back into the deep sea again and again, but it stubbornly repeated the process, over and over. After countless days and nights, its tentacles were torn and mangled, its life nearly extinguished. It finally succeeded in dragging me to safety. A boy walked over on the shore, startling the little octopus which hid behind a rock. It heard the boy say, "Aiden, I'm Miles Morgan. I saved your life, B University campus." The most popular public lecture was so crowded that people were standing in the aisles. After finishing the lesson, I closed my book. "Now for the QA session. You can ask anything." A student raised her hand. "Professor Davies, there's a rumor that you were once saved by a talking sea monster. Is that sea monster real?" "Of course it's fake." My fingers curled slightly, and I narrowed my eyes. "I've only heard the rumors myself. How could a creature evolve so quickly?" A collective sigh of disappointment went through the classroom. I knew it was fake. If a sea monster like that really existed, it would have been captured for research by the government long ago. So the sea monster story from 5 years ago was just tabloid nonsense. Another student raised his hand, his cheeks flushed and his eyes shining. "Professor Davies, are you currently single?" I chuckled. Today's students were getting bolder with each generation. Questions unrelated to academics are not permitted. I gathered my books and walked out of the building. Under a cherry blossom tree stood a tall, curly-haired young man. His blue-black eyes were fixed on me. Some students started teasing. "Is that Professor Davies' boyfriend? He's so handsome. His features are so sharp. Is he mixed race?" On the night I tried to release him 5 years ago, Primo had transformed into a human in a moment of desperation. I didn't know how he did it. Afterward, Primo confessed, "I thought you didn't want to mate with me because I wasn't human. Maybe you thought I had too many tentacles." I covered his mouth in embarrassment. How could he say such things out loud? At first, Triton's human form was unstable. He would often sprout a few tentacles in the middle of the night, greedily clinging to me. Even after he could switch forms freely, he continued to do so, especially in bed. I had scolded him a few times, reaching to pull them off. Triton's eyes would get all misty as he whined. "80, my breeding season isn't over yet. What kind of animal has a breeding season that lasts all year?" "It's so uncomfortable, can I?" I froze. His face was exactly my type, ruggedly handsome and refined, with eyes that held a cool tone and a natural sense of pressure. My heart sped up. "Then be gentle, don't go too far." "I have to teach tomorrow." Triton still loved to explore every crevice, his suckers gently pulsing. "Does it hurt?" There was a long faded scar below my ribs, a raised white line. It was a mark from the bone fracture surgery after the tsunami. An anthropologist once said that the first sign of civilization was a femur that had been broken and then healed. Unlike animals that abandoned their weak, early humans would care for their own with love until they recovered. It was hard to imagine the sheer effort Triton had put in to save me. The thought that I had mistaken my savior for all those years left a sour ache in my heart, not even a tenth of what you must have felt. Triton leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Then you'll have to compensate me properly." The consequence of my soft heart was being thoroughly ravished all night long. Another new year arrived. Triton and I walked side by side, carrying groceries back to the faculty apartment building. There we saw a weary and aged Miles Morgan. "Aiden, I know I was wrong." My brow furrowed. I had no patience for a reunion. "Miles, haven't you served enough time? Are you trying to go back in?" Miles clenched his fists. He knew Triton had become human but didn't dare say it, because everyone would think he was insane. "I can't accept it. What does he have that I don't?" "I felt it back then. You liked me too, didn't you? It's the new year. You're really bad luck." Triton squared his shoulders, ready for a fight. I stepped in front of Triton and said with a cold smile, "Miles, first of all, you stole the credit for saving my life. You lied to me from the very beginning. Secondly, Triton is a genius. He got accepted into my mentor's graduate program on his first try and became his star student." Miles looked utterly lost. "He said he'll work with me slowly to achieve our original dream." Miles's lips trembled. He wanted to say something, but in the end, his head dropped in defeat. After Miles left, the stray cats I usually fed came over, rubbing against my legs. Triton pouted, crossing his arms and grumbling jealously. 80, what's cuter? Fluffy things or me?" I looked down guiltily. Of course, the fluffy things were cuter. A little cat, warmed by the sun, smelling faintly of wheat. I often secretly scooped them up and buried my face in their fur, taking a deep, satisfying sniff. But I would never dare say that out loud. There was an orange tabby kitten, just a few months old, with pink paws and round eyes. It was unbearably cute. Even though there were warm, comfortable cat beds and plenty of food and water in the hallway, I felt the urge to adopt it. When Triton found out, he had a severe stress reaction, hissing wildly at the kitten. Wowza 80, I'm not that different from a cat. You can pet me instead. A cat won't let you pet it here. I couldn't get out of bed for a whole day. He was even more gifted after becoming human. My legs were trembling. I quickly tried to soothe him. You know I've always liked you the best. And you were so cute as a baby, just a tiny little thing in a glass jar, all sparkly, and every one of your tentacles was so soft. My praise made Triton swell with pride, a smile he couldn't suppress spreading across his face. Really? Of course, and now that you're human, you're one in a million handsome. Triton kissed me. Then tell me the story again, about how you chose me from among 1,000 other little octopuses. The end.